I should get mine ready
Hello,
too.
everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are connecting from. It is great to have you with us again today as part of this Hacking HR interview series. Please let us know where you are connecting from in the world. If you can put it in the chat, it would be great to know where you are because, as you know, and I always say it, we do this on LinkedIn Live because it becomes really easy for everybody who is either in the same region or sharing ideas that are, somewhat connected to network with each other. You literally have to click on anybody's name on the chat, and then you click on connect. So you're basically 2 clicks away from connecting with everybody who's participating in this LinkedIn Live conversation that we are having today about Dare to Inspire. And before kicking off the conversation today, I have to say that for those of you in the United States of America right now, and for those of you who are in other countries looking at what's going on in our country right now, you may be wondering what's happening. And it is heartbreaking to see that discrimination, hate, racism, injustice still are very well alive in our society. And sometimes I lack the words to address these things. Sometimes I feel just so tiny compared to the sheer size of all these things that we're going through right now. And it feels difficult to be doing anything else and to be talking about anything else that is not what's going on right now. And while I think that we need to speak up against hate, against discrimination, against violence, against anybody for the way they look, for the way they think, for the God they praise, or for the person they decide to love, I also think that for a lot of us, we decide to choose somewhat of a trench to fight this battle. And the trench from which I am fighting against all of these negative things that are happening is the trench of HR. I think that from HR, we can make a gigantic difference in the way things are happening in our world. I am a firm believer that if we create a better HR, we're going to be creating better workplaces. And when we create better workplaces, we're going to have better societies. So if you are in HR, you have a gigantic responsibility now. Even if it feels too small, it doesn't matter. You have an immense responsibility to talk about the things that are happening today, not only in America, but around the world, because these things are repeated all too often everywhere. My own birth country, Venezuela, going through so much difficulty right now. We have to talk about these things in the workplace. We have to speak up. We have to keep our business and our political leaders accountable to do the right thing. I know and I understand that it can feel frustrating to think that whatever difference you can make is too small, once again, compared to the gigantic size of all that's going on. But imagine for 1 second if we can all put those smaller contributions all together. The snowball effect will literally be unstoppable. So if you are wondering right now what to do, if you don't feel that you want to go out there to protest against injustice and against discrimination, but you wonder, what can I do? Bring this conversation to your workplace. You must bring this conversation to your workplace. You must bring this conversation to your team, to your colleagues, to your coworkers, to your team leaders, so that we can all address what's going on, speak up, and once again, make sure that we're doing the right thing. So I hope that you're all staying safe and well, and I hope that you promote love and justice and tolerance and empathy towards one another, no matter how we are, how we look, what we think, or any of those things. None of that matters, really. We're all in this big human family, if you will. And today we're going to have a fantastic conversation, very aligned to all these things that are happening today in America, but also in other countries. Dare to inspire, inspiration at work. And let me just frame a little bit of the conversation that we're having today. Laura, Campbell, and I had a chat. We don't even know when this happened because now time is warped. Now, nobody knows what day of the week it is anymore. But Laura and I had a conversation, I think it was about a couple of weeks ago. And Laura was explaining to me all the concepts behind the book, Dare to Inspire. And I was thinking, my goodness, that is common sense. I've gone through that myself. And I am so happy to know that a group of people, these amazing thought leaders and authors, have written about it, done the research about it, and I definitely want to bring them on to our interview series to talk about it. So, Sandra, Allison, Jen, Laura, welcome to the Hacking HR interview series. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. And let's kick off by a quick round of introductions so that everybody knows who you are. And by the way, we're going to be raffling 5 Dare to Inspire books. So email me. I'm going to share my email a little later. Email me, and I'm going to add you in the raffling system. Sandra, do you want to kick off the introductions?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I am a co-CEO of our firm InspireCorps along with Allison and Jen, and I am our Chief Perspective Officer. Our titles come from our strengths and our contributions to the firm, and so I'm proud of the title that I carry there. I come from a mix of industry and academic in terms of my background. I grew up in Silicon Valley and the late 1980s and 1990s, and then for the last 20 years have been a professor in business schools teaching MBA programs and executive programs and that kind of thing, and then had the wonderful good fortune of teaming up with Allison and Jen to launch InspireCorps 7 years ago, about something like that.
Wow. Yeah.
Been a part of us for a long time. So I have the wonderful problem of having 2 jobs that I love, one with InspireCorps and one in my classroom with my students.
That is wonderful.
Happy to be with you today.
And I love the thing about the title, by the way. We're going to be talking about that because that has a lot to do with inspiration. Laura, hello.
Yeah, so it's so great. First of all, your whole opening was deeply inspirational. You kind of set the tone for the entire hour that we're going to spend together, and I'm so appreciative of that. I came to InspireCorps. It's my midlife career aspiration to join and do this work and join really the most extraordinary group of people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. I am the VP of Inspired Partnerships. So we'll talk about that later. And, just bringing this work into the world at this moment in time is really a privilege. And I loved our original conversation because the second that I started talking about what we do, your eyes just like bam opened and you were like, I found that experience. I know. And so it feels very natural that we should be here having this conversation with you today. And really, I don't believe that there are any coincidences, and the fact that we're doing this in this moment in time with what's going on is no surprise to me.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for creating the opportunity for this conversation to happen. And yes, I was really excited, and everybody, throughout the conversation will know why I'm so excited about this chat that we're having today. Jen,
Exactly.
Hello.
Hello, Enrique. So glad to be here. My background is a little different than Sandy's and Allison's, and it's part of what made our trifecta so magical when we came together. I come from a very applied background, truly several decades in industry across different industries in Fortune 1000 companies like eBay and Johnson & Johnson. And I was on the buying side for what we offer, for how to develop leaders and teams and cultures, and also, leading large-scale initiatives, global initiatives around how to support large-scale change. And it occurred to me that I had enough wisdom and knowledge that I could translate that into impact and bringing this work into lots of different companies. And so that was really the inspiration for going out and starting InspireCorps 7 years ago.
Well, fantastic. I think it probably adds, well, not probably, I'm sure it adds a lot of incredible perspective to the work that you're doing, your career. So thank you for being here, Jen. And last but not least, of course, Allison. Hello.
Hi, Enrique. Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. Speaking to what Sandy said about titles, I'm also co-CEO and Chief Innovation Officer at InspireCorps. And this title really speaks to one of my strengths, which is around innovation, creativity. I love to make things, create new ideas, new offerings, new ways of working. And we pride ourselves as a company in being innovative and being creative. And I would say this started for me when I was, really, really young. I started my first business when I was 8. I carved soap in the shape of horses and I sold them door to door. I have one of them here right now. This is one of the soaps that I carved as a kid. So it's just kind of this entrepreneurial creative spirit has always been a part of me. My background prior to co-founding InspireCorps, it was in both coaching and emotional intelligence. And I worked for many years with scholars at Yale and a center which is now called the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, really bringing in insights around how do we activate our emotions to be our best in work.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And over the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to have an amazing conversation about inspiration at work. Once again, everybody who's connected online, thank you for being here. Please let us know where you are connecting from in the world. And if you have any questions for this amazing panel that we are chatting with today, please just post it in the chat and I'm going to try to bring it to the table. So let me begin by saying this. This is how Laura hooked me up with this conversation. She was talking about inspiration and she said, well, you're going to give your best and you're going to be your best if you are in an environment doing the kind of work, but also in the physical environment that sort of unleashes the best in you. And I told her, that's incredible because, if you can see my pictures back there, the space that takes the best out of me is the outdoors. I actually live in the forest. I'm surrounded by forest right now. And if my workplaces had allowed me in the past, to work from the mountains, they would have taken and gotten way more out of me than if they had kept me in the 4 walls kind of office in Washington, D.C., where I used to work before. And the kind of work that I was doing was the kind of work that could have been done from wherever. I didn't need to be in an office. Mm-hmm. So they were getting a little bit of me. They were not getting all of me that they could have gotten if they had let me work in a space and an environment that would unleash that kind of inspiration. So I'm going to connect that personal story with the work that you have been doing about finding what inspires people and what happens at work when people are inspired. So let's begin the conversation in there. What happens when people are inspired at work? What happens? And this, by the way,
I'm happy to jump in.
Friends having coffee, whoever wants to jump in, that's great.
Awesome. I'll jump in on this, Enrique, because I think what it looks like, what inspiration looks like at work has a lot to do with how we define it and are really redefining inspiration based on our research that we've done. If you look up inspiration on Google or, Merriam-Webster, and you're looking for the definition, it's not really clear from different definitions what it is. And in fact, they often use the word inspire in the definition of inspiration, which is really confusing to everybody. So we set out in our research to say, we really want to understand this because we know it's important. We know that people and leaders are talking about how it's a critical aspect of what brings forward, to your point, your best in your work. But why? And why is it so powerful? And so the way that we define it is that inspiration happens at the intersection of these 2 things that are occurring at the same time. So one is when you're inspired, you have a greater sense of possibility. And in fact, you even see new possibilities, things that weren't there before, whether it's new solutions to a problem, whether it's a new way of, seeing another person on your team or what's possible for your business. It's like you had blinders on like this, and all of a sudden you go like this. Whoa, I can see more. And it's really exciting. But a lot of people think, okay, well, that's just it. You have new ideas. But that's not what inspiration is as we define it. It's not just about the new possibilities and ideas. At the same time that that's occurring, you have this heightened sense of confidence and courage to take action in the areas that matter most to you. And we call that invincibility. So if you imagine greater possibilities, at the same time, you have invincibility, and those two things happen together, bam, wow, that's a really powerful energy that you can tap into, that you then can direct towards your work, towards your goals, towards the areas that matter most. It's why we often talk about inspiration as almost like engagement 2.0. You know, you can be engaged in something and you're focused and you're motivated, but inspiration is beyond that, because you're not only focused and motivated, you're actually seeing new possibilities and bringing this really strong energy towards what you're doing.
Oof, that is so powerful. Yeah, I'm you know, when Laura was talking about all this, I was inspired to talk more about it. So inspiration, the combination of seeing greater possibilities with invincibility, that is fantastic. How do you think people are more inspired these days now that they are working in a way that makes more sense for them? I know that we're going through all that we're going through, and I don't want to be oblivious to that. We're operating in a framework that is very complicated and unique, but at the same time, there are people who are having now the opportunity to work in an environment where that probably inspires the most, right? Or more people working from home and whatnot. So do you think people are more inspired these days by working in the way they want to work that they couldn't do before?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Enrique. It's we need and benefit from inspiration now, more than ever. But from the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected so much of the way we work, where we work, how we work, what work we do, all that stuff. And even now, as we're kind of adjusting and evolving within that to what's it going to look like long term, what's going to come next, finding what works for us is a process of inspiration, just like you're saying. We talk about inspiration often as having your best days more often, but it's also about just having better days more often. It can help us recover any sort of deficit we've been feeling emotionally or physically or cognitively in our energy. Inspiration can help bring us up and feel stronger. So it's really about how can I be at my best in my current circumstance, and what possibilities are opened up for me in this new way of working, or as I'm adjusting to this new way of working long term, and how can I be more invincible? What am I empowered to do? What would courage look like in this situation? How does confidence come through? And for a lot of us, it's very interesting, this increased almost intimacy that we're having, peering into each other's homes and looking into each other's lives, and our pets and our kids are walking all around while we're having business meetings and all of this. We're seeing each other in some ways, which I think gives opportunities for us to unmask ourselves a little bit and really open up to what's most real inside of us and most true, and find ways to bring that into our work. Be inspired to shine through in that way right now is, I think, a ticket to being most successful in navigating these really tricky, uncertain times.
That is very powerful, and I love this idea of being inspired, having your best day or better days at work. Jen, let me ask you something. You come from an operational background, if you will, and it's just, to me, there's a seeming a very direct connection between having your best days at work and being productive for delivering high performance for that organization. But sometimes you find so many obstacles in the middle, right? So many things at work, whether it is your leaders are bad leaders, you have terrible bosses, or the processes are crappy, or whatever it is, and they become this obstacle after obstacle to prevent people from having their best day at work, therefore delivering their best performance, for that one organization. Why is that? Why is it that something that seems to be so common sense, so straightforward, becomes so difficult to actually implement at work? And I want to ask you this question because you've done the research, but you also come from an operational background, so you've seen the two sides of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is complicated, right? If this were easy, we'd be buying it at Bed Bath and Beyond, right? I mean, to be clear, it is complicated, and it's complicated within ourselves as a system of one. But we take on, how do you make it happen across a system of 8 on a team, right? How do you take on creating it across systems of 100 people in a division, right? Talk about complicated. But this is where we get really excited. And what we did is, when we embarked on the research for the book, Enrique, we just started interviewing. We first thought about the exemplars that we had witnessed in our career. Like, what were the green leaf, absolute shining examples of the most inspiring leadership, the most inspiring teams, the most inspiring organizations, and what was going on there, right? And we got really curious and we started pulling that apart. And what were the elements of that? And then we said, this is not enough. We actually need to do our own original research. So we interviewed over 100 leaders to try to understand how inspiration works. And what we found is that there are predictable patterns of how people inspire themselves, how they inspire amazing teams, and how we inspire organizations. In fact, there are distinct, what the taxonomy we've come up with is about 18 so far, 18 distinct engines, we call them, engines of inspiration, or ways that people predictably inspire themselves. Something else that you said that I think is really important right now is, sometimes we feel a little bit funny entering into a conversation and starting to talk about inspiration right now, because people don't understand our definition, right? And they think of inspiration as kind of this bright, shiny, smiley emotion. And it's so much more than that, right? So I may be getting a little bit off track with your original question, but essentially, some of the engines are grittier, and some of the ways that people predictably inspire themselves are around loss and grief and failure and obstacles. Some of the most successful leaders that we witnessed, the obstacles that you're talking about in organizations, that was inspiring to them. They saw that as like, game on. You want to layer 5 things in my way? Watch me knock them out. That's actually a source of inspiration for them. Right? Hearing the word, being told that something wasn't possible, or hearing no over and over and over again. It's like they come fighting back with verve.
Let me ask you just a quick.
Yeah.
That's powerful, and I want to ask you a quick follow-up question on that one thing that you just said. Some people see obstacles as the end of the world, and for them it ends there. I remember having, I worked in HR for many years, and people saying like, well, I'm not getting opportunities to do this and to do that, therefore I'm not going to do anything. I'm like, well, why don't you build those opportunities yourself, right? Instead of just waiting for somebody else to give them to you. So the question, very much related to what you just said, is how can we flip the switch, if you will, in our heads to see obstacles as the end of the road, as, my life is over in this organization, from there to a place of, they are putting these obstacles on my way. I'm going to show them that I'm going to get inspired by all this stuff on my way, and I'm going to be inspired to see more possibilities, to be invincible and whatnot. So how can we flip that switch, if you will?
Go for it, Sandy. This is so you.
There's 2 things that come to mind, and I know that the 3 of you will add to them. But one is, it is a choice, right? We all have the ability to inspire ourselves. And some are in much more difficult circumstances than others, and I am mindful of that. But it is a choice that we make. And so step 1 is choose it. Step into it and say, I'm going to engineer inspiration into my life. I'm going to make it a practice. I'm going to bring it into my world. Okay, then how, right? That's nice and shiny, but how? And what we talk about, for each individual, there's what we call even a fingerprint of inspiration, meaning the set of those 18 engines Jen talked about that are going to be most useful to you is very specific to you, just like your fingerprint is. And so it's figuring out what turns you on and what gets you excited. For some, it's the obstacles. You don't think I can do it? Watch me show you how. For others, that's not going to be it. It's discouraging to see the obstacles, but perhaps it's a sense of belonging with others or a shared mission connecting to other people that empowers them to surge forward. Or maybe it's tapping into some very unique strengths that they bring to the situation that enables them to navigate around the obstacles or through the obstacles or something like that. So number one, choose it. And then number two, figure out your inspiration fingerprint and start putting that into practice.
That's fantastic. And there's I don't know if you know Viktor Frankl with the book Man's Search for Meaning. Between trigger and response, there's a large space that we can use to choose the way we respond to something. And I love that you're saying it's a choice, right? And sometimes we relinquish that choice to others instead of owning, the decision-making process, if you will, and whatever comes after that. Laura, let me ask you something. You've had dozens of conversations with HR leaders and business leaders in general about this idea of dare to inspire, inspiration at work. What do you find is the most common list of excuses not to do this, right? And it's important for me to know that, or for all of us to know that, because that's how we can address them, if you will. Why do they say no to this?
I've said this to our team. I've said it for months now. And I think I even said it to you that the concept, right? When people first hear the word inspiration, there's a what? Wait, how does that work here? It doesn't fit naturally into the HR, vocabulary. But I actually think one of the silver linings of where we are today is that we hear it all over. We hear it in articles. We hear it in conversations that what people want is their people, their teams, their organization to continue to feel inspired. And part of that is because we know inspiration generates hope and optimism and generative thinking, right? Because of that possibility and invincibility. And those are things that individuals and organizations need to feel right now. There's almost a desperate need for that. And so in our conversations, there's two things that happen. One is that individuals, to Sandy's point, need to know that they have agency to choose how to be inspired and to practice that. But the other piece is for leaders, organizational and team leaders, to also recognize, and you talked about this when you and I had the conversation, have to create conditions for people to activate and to practice inspiration. And you didn't have that.
No.
You didn't have the chance to activate your own inspiration, and it caused you to leave. Yeah. And so what we're saying is create conditions so your people can activate inspiration, because you want to keep talent like you inside, and you want to keep them at their best.
That is not only true, it is powerful. You want to keep the great talent in your organization, but not, like Steve Jobs said once, right? You don't want to hire people, the best people in the world, to tell them what to do. You want to hire them to be invincible and to see all the greater possibilities that they could see by themselves if they are inspired. And unfortunately, I find, of course, many progressive leaders thinking this way. I also find the ones that are, with a whip in the hand, or the carrot and the stick kind of approach, where they don't visualize yet that inspired people will give way more than people who are, subjected to being in a box or forced to behave in certain ways or to work in certain ways. So let me connect that. We got a few questions in the chat. Let me connect all this idea of dare to inspire to inspiring leaders, if you will. We know that organizational change can happen both bottom up, but it also most powerfully than not happens when the leaders are engaged with change and transformation. So what is the importance of having leaders capable of inspiring people in this sort of conversation of dare to inspire at work? What is the importance of having inspirational leaders in the workplace?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that, Enrique. I think we're seeing it especially now because we're going through so many changes, and change is hard. So people respond to change differently. They navigate through it. They experience a lot of different emotions. And, many of those emotions are, difficult ones as they're navigating through change. Leaders often will move through change at a different pace than those that they lead. And this is often because maybe they're closer to the decision making, they're able to, have more agency and control over some of the changes. And so they're sort of moving forward in a way, and this offers them an opportunity to model for those that they lead the new possibilities and the heightened confidence and courage to take action. They get to model inspiration. And in fact, one of the core tenets that we talk about in our book is this idea that a leader's first job is to inspire self. So as a leader, it is your responsibility to connect with what inspires you, to show up with inspiration, to show up with a mindset that creates greater possibilities and invincibility so that you can model it for those that you lead, so that you can invite them to walk shoulder to shoulder with you through the change. And we heard again and again from those that we interviewed, the leaders who were able to do that, they had a sense of this. They had a sense that, when I'm faced with obstacles or, when we're facing this business challenge, I have to stay connected to whatever it is that inspires me, my engines of inspiration. I have to bring this to those around me. And when they do that, also they're able to think of creative ways to inspire those that they lead. And we're seeing that now in a lot of the leaders, mandated, everybody take a day off. Everybody needs a break because we have to, rejuvenate, or giving people more agency in the working from home and supporting different options there. There's a lot of different creative ways that leaders are taking action to inspire those that they lead. But I would just say, a leader's first job is to inspire self.
I love that. And, of course, in the nomenclature of the definition of inspiration that we're talking about, which is seeing greater possibilities and invincibility, that makes total sense. Because if you want to role model this kind of behaviors at work, then you're going to do it yourself first, right? I mean, you won't be able to give what you don't have.
Yeah.
And as an inspired leader, meaning the leader that sees greater possibilities and that is, invincible, if you will, then, you're going to be able to promote such behaviors in the rest of your team because they see you as a role model. So that is fantastic. Of course, I guess you were. Oh, Sandra, yeah.
Can I add to it?
Absolutely.
No, I love everything that you and Allison both are saying about this. We're also seeing that this is a time where some of the smaller actions of leadership are carrying tremendous power, right? So as people are navigating the sort of emotional process that Allison was talking about with change, and we're all going through it at different paces, really effective leaders have the empathy to meet people where they are and say, I see where you are right now. I hear what's happening with you. And here are, then bringing all that Allison talked about in terms of inspiration. So empathy, even vulnerability, right? I too am feeling that challenge. This is how it's affecting me, or this is how I've navigated through it. I get what's happening to you, and showing the humanity, your own humanity as a leader. It's these small acts of caring and intimacy and empathy and vulnerability that are carrying great power right now for leaders, because we need that connection. We need personal leadership right now. I think more than we need great commanding charge up the hill kind of leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need more loving leadership than wartime leadership, right? I mean, it's the time for love and empathy.
Exactly.
I want to share one many years ago, I created this NGO back in my birth country, Venezuela. And I remember giving a talk to some people who were going to be sponsoring part of the work that we were doing. And I never forget one thing that I said was that because they were not poor, they would never understand what poor people were going through. And one person in there said to me, we don't have to be poor to understand. We just have to feel empathy towards them and understanding. That's meaning, because we're probably never going to be poor, right? In the kind of environment that you are describing. The same thing happens right now in our society. None of us is, I'm a Latino, none of us is Asian or Black Americans going through all that is going on today. But that doesn't mean that we don't feel the empathy and understand the pain that some of those communities are going through right now. And I love that you're saying that, because when we have the right kind of leadership, the inspirational leadership, they see greater possibilities to solve these systemic problems that we're dealing with more open-mindedness, if you will, to see more possibilities. And I love that. Jen, I apologize. I know you wanted to say something a couple of seconds ago.
No,
maybe more than 2 seconds.
That was so important. The only thing that I wanted to add to what Allison and Sandy said about inspiring leadership is that organizations have a responsibility as well, that there's a responsibility on the organization side as well. And, one of the things that I like to encourage people to do is to keep track of what we would call an inspiration quotient, like how inspired, or what would a number be that would describe your inspiration on a daily basis. When that wanes, when it falls, or when it's flat, that's a really good time to pay attention. And sometimes that's a good time to make a bigger change. So I in my heart of hearts, after 25 years of doing this, I'm actually really inspired and excited that there is almost I think a Darwinian evolution happening at an organization level, for companies. And the strongest and fittest are the companies that are going to really be tuned in to their leaders. They're going to be investing in training their leaders in new capabilities and new skill sets. And we're going to have even more fun partnering with organizations that are aligned in that commitment. So just a little soapbox there.
One thing that's thank you for bringing that up. And one thing that I believe is going to happen after 2020, which has proven to be a very weird year in a lot of sense, we're going to write a lot of books about all that's going on right now. And one of them I feel will be the role of leadership in organizations, because now we're seeing a decentralized approach to culture, to work. I think people want to, some of the people that may have felt a little uncomfortable at work, or maybe they didn't want to stay there, now they have a number of other areas of concern. And they want to make sure that their organization, whether for them or for their co-workers, is sustainable and in the long term. Therefore, they have to get inspired to see all the possibilities, the greater amount of possibilities, in order to keep that organization flowing. But the role of leadership at the same time has changed now to becoming more of somebody who is keeping all the pieces together, but not somebody who's breathing on anybody's neck to make sure that things are happening. So I think we're gonna see a dramatic, I wouldn't say even evolution, but revolution in the role of leadership going forward. I want to once again acknowledge our community participating in the call today. If you haven't told us yet where you are connecting from, please let us know. If you want to participate in the raffle for the Dare to Inspire book by this amazing group of thought leaders, please send me an email. I'm going to share my email on the chat, and you're going to be participating in the raffle for 5 books. And of course, I guess you imagine this question was going to come. You were talking about 18 engines for inspiration. And while I know that I don't think we're going to have the time to cover them all, I would love to ask you maybe the top 5 most common engines of inspiration that you see in people out there. So I don't know, Laura, if anybody wants to jump in and share with us those top 5. I know they are all important, but the top 5 engines of inspiration.
I'm going to let the 3 of them answer, but I think it's really clear to all of us. There's a few that are very prominent right now.
Awesome. Very contextualized. I love it.
Yeah, that are worth it.
Anybody?
I'll jump in with like two of the meta engines, if you will. Like we just know they carry more weight and they are higher octane in terms of the fuel that they provide. One is purpose, right? This is a meta, like your impact beyond yourself, how you fit in this whole equation of humanity. And another one that we speak about early in the book as a meta engine is strengths activation, right? Just knowing that your unique gifts and contributions are being used and appreciated through your work. So those are two really big ones. So lining those up right now is really important.
Awesome. Purpose and strength activation. Sandra, Allison, you want to add a couple more to that?
I'll throw one, and then Allison. You know, I'm talking with a lot of leaders who are just feeling a little bit lost, a little bit off their footing. And one thing that I think helps regain some surety in what you're saying is one of the engines that we talk about. The engines are in three categories: engines that come from within yourself, engines that come from relationship with others, and engines that are about circumstance that you're in. And there's 6 in each category. And one of the ones that's about relation to others is heroes and mentors. And sometimes if you say to yourself, who is somebody that inspires me? Who is someone that I admire, whether it's your mother or your coach or Martin Luther King Jr., right? You know, whatever the relation, and say, how might they handle it? It gives us a way to see more possibilities and envision something different, but in a way that's consistent with our values and our purpose. And that seems to be a way for people to find some footing at this point. So that's one that I think is particularly useful.
Love it.
Sandy, I have to jump in with a story. Someone who, a coaching experience I had this week where she naturally brought forward, because she's facing some of the most incredible challenges she's ever faced in her career and her life. And she's really calling on the experiences she's had with mentors, and specifically remembered a saying that she was taught early on, like, don't be the victim, was this mantra that she's bringing forward right now. And she also thought about her mother who had passed, and what her mother would say to her, that she'd pour her a cup of tea and sit her down and just help her make sense of things. And she's been drinking more tea lately, which is really inspiring. But, you know, just I wanted to bring a little color to what that feels like and looks like.
Yeah, I think, you know, leaders want to have the answers and want to know the right thing to say all the time. And this is a time of great uncertainty. We don't have answers. So we can take the heat off ourselves a little bit.
I love that, Sandra. And I want to say something. At the very beginning of this crisis, a lot of people were asking me, you know, what do you think we should be doing in the workplace right now? And, you know, a lot of uncertainties. But one of the things that I said is make sure that your leaders, you know, show up as human and vulnerable as, you know, they are by the sheer fact of being a human. And what that means is that a lot of people will be asking questions, and those leaders will not have the answers. And it's okay not to have the answers. Just come to your meeting and tell people, I don't know. You know, I have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah. I don't know how we're going to survive this thing that we're going through right now. And the reality is that because I don't know, now I'm getting inspired to see greater possibilities by all of us coming together and finding the ways to respond to these dramatic questions that we're being faced to. Because I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. That's being human. You know, there's this story of a leader. You know, Spataro told me the story of her CEO. You know, he has, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 kids and the pets at home, and he doesn't have a space to work at home. So he was connecting to the town hall meetings online from the bathroom, and he was putting a virtual background in the bathroom. And the CHRO told him, don't put a virtual background. Show yourself as you are. You are connecting from the bathroom because that's the only space in your house where you can connect from. That's the human you. That's what people want to see. Sandra, Allison, I know you wanted to add a couple of things to the engines of inspiration.
Well, I was just going to speak to the fact that, Enrique, that you actually brought up one of the engines of inspiration, which is in the category Sandy mentioned, that is inspiration from people and others and relationships. And that engine is vulnerability and transparency. It came up again and again when we interviewed leaders, that when they're able to share more of themselves, it certainly can inspire those around them, but it can also inspire them as leaders to be open with those around them. And so it's a really important engine that I do think relates a lot to what's happening now. The other one that I would add is this idea of a shared mission. And this one has come up, I've heard with, many of our clients we've been speaking to, and especially those that some of those that we know who are on the front lines of all of this. So in healthcare systems, caring for patients. And this idea that we have, they're coming together around a really clear shared mission. And it connects to purpose, but shared mission is very specifically about what are we doing now? And at this point right now, sometimes it's even what are we doing in this next hour? Because things change so fast, especially on the front lines in healthcare right now and in hospitals. So this particular leader said that they would come together around huddles, sometimes multiple times a day, to talk about new policies, procedures that have changed. And they would reconnect and create this shared mission for what they were doing next. And it really brought forward for everyone on this team the sense of possibility and heightened confidence, courage, and visibility, because they knew very clearly what they needed to do and why it was important. And I think during times of uncertainty like we're in now, that's really hard because we often don't know what's needed. And so the more that leaders can communicate, even in a very micro way, here's what we need to do now and here's why it's important, that shared mission can be very inspiring to everyone on the team.
I love that. And there's so much power in that, because very often the leaders focus on communicating the how instead of communicating the why, where we're going, what we need to do right now. I'm going to let you figure out the how, because now you're inspired and you see greater possibilities. By the way, you can tell that I love the concept, right? So now you see greater possibilities. You will try to find the answers to the questions that we have, but this is the shared mission that we have as an organization. This has been an amazing conversation, and I think we're going to have it again probably sometime, in the next 2 or 3 months, once we, I don't know where we're going to be by then, hopefully in a better place. But, I truly and fully enjoyed this conversation about Dare to Inspire at Work. I know everybody who's connected on the chat. I just put my email in there. If you want to participate in the raffle for 5 books, Dare to Inspire, please send me an email and you're going to be added in the system too, in the raffling system that we use. And I want to be, once again, very thankful and appreciative of your time, Sandra, Laura, Jen, and Allison, to have this conversation with me today. Thank you so much. And lastly, I don't want to let you go before I connect back to something that we were talking about at the beginning. And I'm going to say some of my favorite words from Martin Luther King Jr. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If we don't do the right thing in our workplace, that's going to create a snowball effect that will affect everybody later. When you see things like police brutality, when you see things like discrimination, we saw this guy in Kentucky hanging with a noose, an image of the governor. That guy was fired from work. But if we tackle all these problems from the onset and we have these conversations, we probably will be able to avoid a lot of the things that are happening right now. Injustice anywhere is a threat of justice everywhere. And what that means is that if we are able, the opposite side, the flip side of that, is that if we're able to do the right thing at work, with our families, with our friends, to speak up against hate and discrimination and violence, I am sure that we're going to be able to also create a snowball effect that is unstoppable, which is the right thing, spreading love and tolerance and understanding. So please make sure that wherever you are, in whatever you do, you see the greater possibilities to build a better world for everybody. And to do that, we must do the right thing. That is the flip side of injustice anywhere as a threat of justice everywhere. Allison, Jen, Laura, Sandra, it was a beautiful conversation, and I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Everybody
much.
stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique.
Bye-bye.